Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing the entire Resident Evil franchise on PC on the RTX 3060, so as usual the entire franchise. So let's start with Resident Evil 1 Remake Remastered, yeah that's the actual name. Unfortunately it goes up to 2560 by 1600, not 1440p, so we're going to keep it on 1080 with the highest settings. And this is going to be a quick one, it's not really hard to run at all. So let's quickly get to it. Let's do a new game with Jill. Resident Evil. So yeah, this game is great. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend you do so. It runs on a potato, so it isn't an issue for this card at all. But again, unfortunately, there are some limitations. You can mod it to do higher resolutions and better background textures. I think this is why they limit the resolution so much. Let me skip this, doesn't matter. And come on.
There are only 3.
Yeah. And let me get the cursor out of the screen. Sorry about that, guys. So no surprises here, it's 120 FPS all the time, and we have a lot of GPU power to spare. If we had it at 4K, if that was possible, we would get still 100 FPS. It's not a hard game to run at all. Remember, this is a remaster from a GameCube game with better textures, better models and all that. And as you can see here at the right, this texture is pretty low resolution, so if you're using mods for graphics, well, you're probably going to get better textures and a higher resolution. So yeah. Not much to say about this one, actually. So let's get to the next one. So now we're testing Resident Evil 0. And this one is interesting because it's the same premise as on the first one, the one we tested before this one. And we actually can do 4K, so let's get started, shall we? I don't even remember where I was. Let me see if I have any saves whatsoever. Nope, no saves. Let's try that again. So again, this one's super easy to run. We should be less than a minute checking this one out. The door to safety is shut. There is no turning back. Okay, so for what I'm seeing, it doesn't seem to be native 4K actually. Yeah, I can see a lot of Yagis. So probably a lie that you can do 4K. Too bad. Still, over 100 FPS, pretty old game really. No surprises on this one. So yeah. I'm going to move a little bit further and swap to the next one.
This is Officer.
So yeah, classic fixed camera angles. Although there seems to be a little bit more 3D on this one. But the internal resolution again doesn't seem to be 4K at all. Seems nowhere close. I'm on a 4K display. So yeah. Anyway. Let's swap to the next game. Now we're into Resident Evil 2 Remake, and for this one, there's ray tracing features. You can go back to the DX11 version, but I'm going to discuss that in a moment. 3200 by 1800, very close to 4K. I'm basically almost maxed out, one texture setting below the maximum. I lowered the shadows from max to high, really not noticeable in my opinion. And basically volumetric lighting. I mean, the visual difference is pretty small, but you get a good performance difference. HPIO plus, and that's basically it. So let's get back into the game.
I'll get you out.
Skip this. So 1800p looks very sharp on a 4K display, which I recommend you do to get 60 frames. Otherwise at 4K you're going to drop below 60 frames pretty often. There's also ray tracing features that are exclusive to this version of the game, that is on the X12. You can roll back to the DX11 version on Steam. So if you want better performance, my advice is try the DX11 version without ray tracing. I'm going to test ray tracing on a separate video. You can probably pull it off at 1440p and 1080p on this graphics card. And this part drops below 60 because it's a corridor of death, like Digital Foundry likes to say. The volumetrics destroy performance in this part. So yeah. I played this part of the game so many times for benchmarks, it's kinda ridiculous. So 1800p looks super sharp on a 4K display, of course not native 4K, but close enough. That's the trick modern consoles use. And if you want slightly better performance, the X11 on the previous build in the beta branch on Steam is my advice.
Does anyone know what started this?
So yeah, I love this game, one of my favorite Resident Evils and remakes ever created. And if you want ray tracing, you can do so, but I do not recommend it. It's pretty underwhelming in this game, especially in this first area. Then when you're in the labs and all that, it's more noticeable.
This is not how I imagined
So yeah,
the first day.
pretty good looking game, runs amazingly well. You get the great visuals, super sharp. Of course, if you do lower resolutions, you can do ray tracing, you can get hundreds of FPS if you're on 1080p or 1440p. So yeah, let's jump into Resident Evil 3 Remake. Now Resident Evil 3 Remake, very similar settings to what I did on Resident Evil 2 Remake, 1800p, so super sharp on 4K. No ray tracing because, again, I think it's pretty underwhelming on this one. Then basically highest settings, kinda highest settings, one step below the highest textures and one step below the highest shadows. Personally, I think it's not worth the performance hit. And I also lowered the volumetrics to medium for a select performance hit. And basically the rest is cranked up. And this one, again, runs very similar to RE2 Remake. That's why I'm using very similar settings. And you can also roll back to the previous version in the Steam beta branch for DX11 support, which is probably going to run better than this one. Although this one seems to be more stable on the frame time side of things, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you want to do 4K, you can also use ultra quality FSR, but I think 1800p native, like this one, like I'm doing right now, looks better on this display. Let me skip this and this. So yeah, keep that in mind. But I'm going to probably do a separate video on this one, showing off ray tracing and lower resolutions. Again, if you're doing 1080p, 1440p, you're going to get over 100 FPS super easily. We are very close to 4K on this one. So yeah, very similar to RE2 Remake in terms of performance. Visuals are pretty good. And you can also roll back to the previous version. That's basically it. Although this is more of an action focused game. That's why some people, especially the original RE3 enthusiasts, do not like it. And they cut content and all that. And the drops below 60 are when exploding barrels, basically. Which is not major. The explosion lasts a couple seconds. So yeah, let's jump into RE4 HD project. Now we're doing the Resident Evil 4 HD project, so it's the Ultimate HD edition on Steam with the HD project, a fan-made mod that took years to make. So yeah, 4K 8x MSAA because we have more than enough GPU power to do so. And the mod comes with this menu, so we have additional FOV and some visual fixes, so you can put it like me. Check these boxes that you see on the screen. And there are many tweaks that you can do on other stuff, such as QTEs and things that change due to the game being at 60 frames. So let's continue with the game. If you played Resident Evil 4 before, well, you're going to notice a massive texture and lighting boost, at least if you pay attention. So let's get directly to the chainsaw guy part. So yeah, we cover every door and grab the shotgun. You do this every time you play the game, so we might as well be quick about it. Very high resolution models now with bump mapping. Okay, yeah, the grenade as well. Super high res textures. Looking great. And unfortunately the game is locked to 60 frames and we have forced VSync. You can disable VSync, but going over 60 frames, well, that's not a good idea at all. So just stick to 60, do yourself a favor. Make it easier on yourself. So yeah, I mean 60 frames just fine. Okay, that was weird. Go. Chainsaw guy. Let's get him. But as you can see, more than enough for 60 frames, obviously. 3060, a very old game. Of course, a lot of graphical tweaks. But still, not super demanding at all. You can even do 8K if you want to. I would not recommend it because it already looks just fine like this. So yeah. Just make sure you're forced to 60 frames with VSync. Otherwise, if you go over 60, I mean, you can disable VSync, but it's not going to be a good experience. So 60 as a maximum is a good idea. Anyway, if you want to get this mod, link in the description, very easy to install. The game looks great, and I think it's the best way to play it so far. So yeah, let's test Resident Evil 5. Now we're testing Resident Evil 5, so 4K, highest settings, 8x MSAA, so let's get to it. I'm using a controller, no mods, and unfortunately, sorry for the screen tearing, the game is locked to 120 FPS, which is interesting because in the benchmark tool there is unlocked frame rates, so not sure what's up with that. So yeah, here we are. As you can see, more than enough GPU power to do so. If the game was able to get 140 FPS, I'm pretty sure it will be there very easily. Although some fire on screen drops below 120. But I mean, we're at 4K, highest settings, and 8x MSAA. Absolutely unnecessary levels of MSAA. But hey, here we are. I love this game. Co-op, especially. Without co-op, I don't like the AI. Otherwise, pretty fun if you wanted to play with someone. So you have an ungodly amount of hours on this game. I unlocked absolutely everything multiple times. So yeah, pretty easy to run, as you can see. DX9. The DX10 version for some reason doesn't exist anymore, which I found pretty interesting. And there are many mods that you can download for extra FOV. As you can see, half the screen is Chris. Well, you can download a mod to get a wider FOV and to change the color palette and all that. So yeah, if you want to play this game, here it is, runs just fine. 4K 120, 8x MSAA. So yeah, let's continue to Resident Evil 6. Now I'm testing Resident Evil 6, and this one has less options than Resident Evil 5 and no MSAA, so 4K and high settings. Let's get into the game. Just like Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6 is locked to 120, so it seems to be an engine thing. And I'm in the Chris campaign, because more action, you know. I played this on the PlayStation 3 when it released, and I enjoyed it quite a bit, but nowadays I cannot digest this game. It's such a large game, so many levels, it's kind of ridiculous. And I don't know, I lose interest super quickly when playing this game. I don't know what my childhood mind was thinking when playing this, but it was a lot of fun. Fun memories of Resident Evil 6. Nowadays I just play Mercenaries every once in a while. Just like RE5 again, locked to 120. Highest settings 4K, you can probably do 8K just fine. Maybe on a separate video. So yeah, if you were curious about Resident Evil 6, yeah, it runs just fine. More than enough GPU power. Of course, pretty old game. And I haven't checked mods for this one. Because I don't play it much really. Only Mercenaries every once in a while. Although I do like how it controls. I love that I can do this in the game. that I can dodge. Anyway. So yeah, I think you saw enough. Let's go to Resident Evil 7. So now we're checking out Resident Evil 7. Without the RT upgrade, we're rolling back to the DX11 version because with the ray tracing, seems to be visually broken. So I think the original works and looks the best. So settings, as you can see here, I lowered the shadows a little bit and the ambient occlusion to SSAO. The rest basically maxed out. So we're targeting 60 frames at 4K. So here we go. Sorry about the the screen tearing. Wasn't on purpose. We're over 60, so you can use VSync if you want to. So let's fight Mr. Jack. I cannot skip this, so in the meantime, I was going to mention the upgraded version on Steam is DX12 only, uses more VRAM, has ray tracing if you want to use it, but the ray tracing breaks the visuals of the game, at least in my opinion. So I think you're better off playing the DX11 version. Better performance, and visually it's not broken. Hopefully they fix that soon, but right now, it is what it is. So yeah, Resident Evil 7, my advice, again, keep it like I'm showing you right now. You can play at 4K, has great visuals still, even to this day, and you can get 4K 60 frames. So yeah, let's run over Jack. Come on, Jack. Thank you for that. And the VRAM usage is okay, so if you want to do 1440p, you can also do so, probably targeting 100 FPS. Not sure on the CPU side how that goes in this game, but in general it should be okay. So now I'm going to speed up this part because it gets very boring and there's a lot of fire, so let's get to the fiery part. Okay, so now that I sped up that part, we can finally start shooting. Let's get the gun. And there's going to be fire on screen, which is great to see performance. And we have screen space reflections for some things. The fire is not one of them. So yeah, we're still over 60 frames. Let's see once the car explodes. There we go. Okay, still over 60 just fine. And there we go, Jack on fire. So yeah, it should be okay with the settings I'm showing you right now. Just avoid the ray tracing features version. On the beta branch, just select DX11, like I'm testing right now. Let's now test Resident Evil Village. Okay, so now we're on Resident Evil Village, and on this one I selected 4K as well. This is the most recent one in the series. And I'm using ultra quality FSR 1.0. Yeah, I know, not as good as 2.0, but at 4K it's really good looking, at least in my opinion. I'm playing on a 4K display, by the way. Then anti-aliasing on TAA, well, this is locked because of FSR. Texture quality, let me crank it up a little bit higher. Should be on, yeah, high 6GB should be okay. Mesh quality on max, ray tracing disabled. In this game, I don't think it's worth it, at least considering the performance hit. SSAO for ambient occlusion. Volumetric lighting on medium, because at least for me they look the same. Shadows on high instead of max, because the resolution of the shadows is a little bit higher, nothing whoa major. So I recommend for this resolution to do high. Contact shadows on, shadow cache on, and basically the rest enabled. So let's get to it. And as you can see now, I'm in the part with more foliage, close to the very beginning of the game, and I chose this part for a very clear reason. At least for me, when there is all this foliage on screen, I drop frames. Of course, after this I'm doing 1440p just to show you guys that you can also do that. Okay, perfect. Mine. I needed some some ammo. Perfect. And again, sorry about the screen tearing. Only 60 Hz. This monitor. Okay, lichens should show up. Come on, attack me. Let's put this right here and see the explosion. Come on. Don't be cowards. Okay, this is odd. What the hell are they doing? There we go. Explosion. Okay, the explosion dropped us into the 57 FPS range. Nothing major. We're still okay. So yeah, this is basically 4K with ultra quality FSR. Still looks great. So yeah. Anyway. Let's run the same part but at 1440p native. Okay, so I'm now back at 1440p this time around. Everything basically maxed out, excepting those textures. They are on high 6 gigs instead of high 8 gigs, so we keep the VRAM in check. No ray tracing, because performance hit is too high for the visual difference. And yeah, that's basically it. Let's go. Same as before, a lot of foliage. We drop into the 80s. Oh, how terrible. 80 FPS when foliage shows up. Yeah, considering the age of the game, I think that's pretty good. We're talking about a 3060 here. This is not 2080 or 3080. And we're doing a pretty high resolution. So that's always good. Let's keep the mind close to me. There. Okay, they exploded. Wonderful. And yeah, we drop into the upper 70s. No big deal. Yeah. Yeah, 1440p is fine as well. So if you have a 1080p screen, you can basically max it out. You can even use ray tracing if you want to. Personally, I would just won't bother with ray tracing in this game. I mean, indirect lighting is nice and all, but considering the performance impact, maybe on 1080p, but you're just going to get 60 frames, or you can get 100 if you're doing 1080p, so... I mean, even in this part, at 1440p, I'm getting over 90 FPS. There's a reason I tested this section, because it drops frames. So yeah, this should be running worse than the castle, as an example. The amount of foliage and all that. Anyway. I think that should do for now. Let's jump into the next one. I'm testing Resident Evil Revelations. Unfortunately, it goes up to 1440p, it doesn't go to 4K. And it's a very easy game to run, we're on the highest settings. This is a game that was made for the Nintendo 3DS and then released for the current-gen consoles back then. So yeah. I mean, it's going to run fine no matter what. Come on, attack me. Monster. No, not attacking? Okay. So yeah, basically you're going to get 120 FPS all the time. It's very easy to run. So this will be a very short test for this one. Let's grab this. Yeah. We skip the cutscene. What's next? I think this thing is going to attack us. So I can shoot something in the video at least. There we go. It's a great game, don't get me wrong. Just in this video it's pretty pointless to show more footage. It'll run just fine, it's not even using half the GPU, and it makes complete sense. So let's jump into Revelations 2. I'm testing Resident Evil Revelations 2, 4K, everything maxed out basically, so you don't have to do much at all. It works right away. Like on the previous games in the franchise, 5, 6, Revelations 1, is locked to 120 FPS, so it doesn't go above 120, basically, so yeah, you're stuck at 120 FPS. But this is 4K, so if you happen to have a 144Hz 4K monitor, you're going to have a super smooth experience with a very high pixel count. And this wasn't a game made for the 3DS like the first one. This was for the current gen consoles back then in mind. And it runs pretty poor on the consoles. So it's great to have good performance on the PC. As you can see, very little CPU usage as well, which is kind of funny.
Do me a favor and don't put
So yeah,
me in the same sentence, sir.
runs completely fine. I mean, it makes complete sense. It's a 3060, but still.
Pedro said the signal came from
And as you can see now, with more foliage on screen than on the first levels, you're going to get better performance overall. Sorry, worse performance overall than on the first levels. I'm usually centered in testing the first levels for this one because it's more interesting. This part is slower. That's why... Okay, there we go. Never mind. Some action. So yeah, there are some drops below 120, but it stays over 100 basically all the time, and we have GPU power to spare, so yeah. I just use explosives because the benchmark says so. In the meantime, please open the door, Moira. While she does that, I attack. As you can see, this one, very easy to run. The only one that is kind of a challenge for this card will be Resident Evil Village, but you can do almost 4K on it. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can basically play the entire franchise very close to 4K, over 60 frames basically. And just use ultra quality FSR if you're doing Resident Evil Village. Otherwise, it's all fine. Great experience on the entire franchise. So I hope you guys enjoyed this different video checking out these games in the franchise on the 3060. And by different video I mean I'm speaking throughout the entire thing. I hope you enjoy this different kind of content. So yeah, thank you so much for watching and I'll see ya next time. Thank you guys, bye bye.